The sun hung low over the sprawling ranch, casting a golden glow across the fields of wheat and barley. Birds flitted among the wooden fences, their songs blending with the distant lowing of cattle. This was the world of James Whitmore, a wealthy rancher whose name carried weight throughout the county. Despite his wealth and status, James lived a life of quiet discipline, preferring the steady rhythm of the ranch to the chaos of city life. His days began before dawn, overseeing the workers, inspecting the horses, and ensuring that every corner of his estate was in perfect order. Though he was respected and sometimes feared for his strictness, those who knew him understood that his heart was fair, even kind, hidden beneath a stoic exterior. Into this ordered world stepped Clara, the new maid. She arrived one early morning, her hands clutching a small satchel, her eyes wide with both apprehension and excitement. Clara was timid by nature, soft-spoken and careful in her movements, as though each step carried the weight of 100 unspoken rules. She had grown up in a modest household and was not accustomed to wealth or grandeur, let alone the responsibilities of managing a household as large as Whitmore Ranch. The mansion itself was a masterpiece of craftsmanship, with polished wooden floors, tall windows that overlooked the rolling pastures, and walls lined with portraits of stern ancestors whose eyes seemed to follow every move. For Clara, every detail of her new environment was both awe-inspiring and intimidating. James observed her arrival with his usual calm demeanor, noting her nervous hesitation as she adjusted her apron and took in the grand dining room where she would be serving meals. There was something delicate and fragile about her, he thought, but also a quiet diligence that suggested she would not falter in her duties. Clara's shyness was apparent, her voice barely rising above a whisper when she greeted him, and her hands trembled slightly as she set down the cleaning supplies. Yet, beneath the timidity, there was a spark, a sense that she cared deeply about doing things right, even if her uncertainty sometimes slowed her movements. The ranch itself was a character in its own right, alive with motion and sound. Horses stamped in their stables, their hooves echoing off the wooden beams. Chickens pecked at the ground near the barns, and the distant wind carried the scent of hay and earth. Within the mansion, the rooms smelled faintly of polished wood and lavender, a lingering trace of Clara's careful cleaning. Everything was precise, orderly, yet there was room for warmth, a welcoming atmosphere that reflected James's quiet pride in his estate. As Clara began her work, James noticed her cautious attention to every detail. She polished the silverware meticulously, straightened the cushions on the chairs with care, and moved through the rooms as if she feared disturbing the balance of the household. Her actions were slow but thoughtful, revealing a patience that was rare and admirable. James, who was accustomed to efficiency and directness, found himself observing her with a mixture of curiosity and amusement. There was a subtle elegance in her movements, a gentle respect for the home that spoke of her upbringing and her innate goodness. By the end of the first morning, Clara had already made an impression on James. Though she had barely spoken beyond polite greetings, her presence had a calming effect on the household. He realized that beneath her timid exterior lay a character shaped by diligence, respect, and perhaps a quiet resilience. As the sun dipped further, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, James found himself reflecting on this unexpected new addition to his home. Clara was not merely a maid to perform duties, she was someone whose actions, small, careful, thoughtful, hinted at a depth that intrigued him. And in that quiet, golden hour on the ranch, the first threads of curiosity and admiration began to weave themselves in James's mind, setting the stage for the story that was about to unfold. As days passed on the ranch, James Whitmore began to observe Clara more closely. Her presence, once just a quiet addition to the household, started to intrigue him in subtle ways. It wasn't that she made mistakes, on the contrary, every task she undertook, from polishing silverware to tending the fireplaces, was completed with meticulous precision. But there were moments, brief flashes, that caught his attention, a glance lingering on a neglected corner of the garden, a hesitant pause as she moved past an unlocked drawer, or the quiet way she hummed to herself while dusting the library shelves. James, who was accustomed to reading people and understanding their motives almost instinctively, sensed that Clara's shyness might be hiding something deeper, a part of her character yet unseen. He began noticing patterns in her behavior that both puzzled and fascinated him. When the ranch hands were present, she spoke little, offering soft nods and polite smiles, retreating into the background. Yet, when she thought no one was watching, her actions became purposeful, almost deliberate. She would adjust the position of a picture frame, gently straighten the curtains, or leave small notes on the kitchen counter, their messages simple yet thoughtful, reminders for the cook, instructions for the stable hands, or little words of encouragement. These small gestures seemed to flow naturally from her, But James couldn't help feeling there was more beneath them, perhaps a cleverness, or even a mischief, concealed by her timid exterior. Curiosity gnawed at him. Why did someone so shy and delicate display such careful attentiveness when she believed herself unobserved? James had managed the ranch for years, seen dozens of workers come and go, and encountered all kinds of personalities. He knew that outward appearances often masked hidden traits, and he suspected Clara was no different. Perhaps she had a clever streak, or perhaps her timidity was a mask for something else entirely. The notion both annoyed and delighted him. He hated being puzzled, yet he was captivated by the mystery. It was one evening, as the sun dipped low behind the hills and the mansion's windows reflected a soft amber glow, that James decided he needed to know the truth. He wanted to observe Clara's character without the influence of social conventions or politeness, without the awareness that she was being judged. He wanted to see her in her natural state, free from expectation. The idea formed quietly in his mind. As a seed of intrigue, he would feign sleep, allowing her to go about her duties as if no one were watching. That night, after dinner, James retired to his large bedroom. The room, lined with heavy drapes and rich wooden furniture, was silent except for the occasional creak of the floorboards as Clara moved softly about, completing her evening chores. He instructed her politely to leave him to rest, and she curtsied, her hands clasped nervously, before retreating into the hallway. Then, James lay still on his bed, closing his eyes and breathing slowly, pretending to drift into sleep. His mind, however, was alert, analyzing every sound, every movement. He watched as Clara paused outside the door, perhaps sensing a presence yet unsure of its attentiveness. She hesitated, then took a small step forward, her movements cautious. James felt a thrill of anticipation. He was about to uncover the truth behind her quiet demeanor, to witness the actions that she believed would go unseen. What he didn't yet know was that the truth would surprise him, not because of wrongdoing, but because of an unexpected depth of kindness and thoughtfulness that he had never imagined. The ranch, bathed in moonlight, held its breath with him. This quiet experiment, born from curiosity and a desire to understand Clara, was about to reveal not just her character, but something about James himself, a recognition that appearances could be deceiving, and that the timid and reserved might hide the noblest of hearts. James lay motionless on the large oak bed, his eyes closed, breathing steady, as if he had slipped into a deep, peaceful sleep. Every muscle in his body was relaxed, yet his mind remained alert, straining to catch every sound in the room. The faint rustle of Clara's skirt on the polished floorboards reached his ears, followed by the soft creak of the door as it opened just a fraction. He could hear the careful, almost hesitant steps of the timid maid as she entered the room, unaware that she was under observation. Clara paused for a moment at the foot of the bed, her eyes scanning the dimly lit room. Moonlight streamed through the windows, painting silvery lines across the floor and casting shadows that danced against the walls. For a brief instant, she froze, uncertain whether she should proceed. James could almost feel her apprehension radiating through the quiet air. She straightened her back, clasped her hands together, and then, with a slow, deliberate motion, began tidying the room. He watched, fascinated, as she moved with care and precision, adjusting the folds of the bedspread, straightening the edge of the rug, and picking up a small book that had fallen from the nightstand. Each action was gentle, respectful, and deliberate. There was no hint of mischief or negligence, only thoughtfulness, as if she were determined to leave the room in perfect order, not for James, but for the sake of her own conscience. James felt a twinge of surprise. He had expected to witness minor imperfections, perhaps some small, forgetful mistake, or the curiosity of a maid exploring a wealthy man's private space. Instead, he saw something entirely different, a quiet, careful devotion to the home she served. Clara moved with a natural grace, her timid demeanor masking a steadfast dedication that James had not anticipated. Even the smallest gestures, the way she replaced a misplaced pen, the way she smoothed the curtains, revealed an attentiveness that went far beyond mere duty. He held his breath as she approached the writing desk near the window. She hesitated again, then, as if guided by an unseen impulse, opened the drawer. For a moment, James tensed, expecting a curious glance at his personal letters or perhaps some playful mischief. But instead, she gently rearranged a few scattered papers, aligning them neatly, and left a small note tucked beneath the inkwell. James's curiosity surged. He could not resist the urge to peek at the paper. It simply read, "The evening is calm. Rest well, sir." The simple message, thoughtful and unobtrusive, struck him more profoundly than he had expected. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Clara continued her quiet ministrations, watering the small indoor plants, dusting the shelves, and even straightening the rug at the entrance. Every action, though small, was performed with a care and consideration that revealed a depth of character James had not anticipated. The timid maid, whom he had initially viewed with polite curiosity, was demonstrating a natural kindness and attentiveness that went far beyond expectation. Finally, she approached the doorway, pausing to glance back once more, as if sensing she had fulfilled her task to the best of her ability. She gave a soft sigh, almost a whisper of relief, and left the room, her movements as quiet as shadows. James remained on the bed a moment longer, absorbing what he had just witnessed. His initial curiosity had transformed into admiration, tempered with astonishment. The simple acts of the shy maid had revealed a thoughtful, gentle, and noble character, an unexpected revelation that both surprised and humbled him. In that silent room, bathed in moonlight, James realized that the experiment he had planned to test her had failed in one sense. It had not uncovered any flaw or mischief, but instead had unveiled a remarkable purity of character. The timid maid was far more remarkable than he had ever imagined, and for the first time, he felt the stirrings of admiration, not only for her diligence but for the kindness and subtle wisdom that shone through every quiet action. James lay still, his heart quietly racing, as Clara's soft footsteps receded into the distance. For several moments, the room was silent, except for the faint rustle of the curtains in the evening breeze. He could hardly believe what he had just witnessed. Her actions, so small, so unassuming, had carried a depth of care and thoughtfulness that far exceeded anything he had imagined. What had begun as a simple test to observe her behavior had transformed into a revelation. Clara's timid exterior hid an unexpectedly noble heart. As he reflected, James recalled the subtle details that had caught him off guard. The way she had carefully aligned every item on the desk, leaving a note that radiated gentle consideration. The way she had tended to the indoor plants as if each leaf mattered, smoothing their soil and trimming stray leaves without being asked. Even the small gesture of straightening the rug at the door spoke volumes. She cared about the space, about the order, about leaving a mark of quiet respect on her surroundings. These were not tasks performed out of obligation, they were actions that revealed her nature, thoughtful, meticulous, and kind. But it was what she did next that truly stunned him. James had expected her to leave once her chores were complete, but instead, she quietly returned to the bookshelf near the window. There, she carefully pulled out a small, dusty journal that had been forgotten for months. Sitting on the floor, she opened it and began writing in neat, delicate handwriting. Though he could not read the words from where he lay, James realized she was documenting her observations, perhaps small improvements she wished to make, reminders for herself, or notes on how best to care for the mansion and its inhabitants. The depth of her thoughtfulness and the dedication she poured into even these unseen acts left him utterly astonished. For James, who had often relied on wealth and authority to maintain control and order, witnessing Clara's quiet diligence was a humbling experience. Here was a young woman who, without expectation of reward or recognition, performed acts of kindness and attentiveness that were far more meaningful than anything money could buy. The realization struck him deeply. Her humility, her diligence, and her genuine care for the ranch and its inhabitants were qualities far rarer than wealth or status. Finally, Clara placed the journal back on the shelf with careful precision, as if it were a treasured possession. She glanced back once at the bed, a faint smile playing at her lips, and then quietly retreated from the room, leaving James in the soft glow of moonlight. He remained still for a long moment, absorbing the full impact of what he had witnessed. Every action she had taken, from the simplest gesture to the most deliberate task, spoke of a character shaped by kindness, patience, and thoughtfulness. In that silence, James felt an unexpected swell of admiration. What had begun as a test born from curiosity had revealed far more than he had anticipated. Clara was not merely a shy maid, she was a remarkable young woman whose quiet strength, attention to detail, and natural goodness spoke louder than words ever could. And for the first time, he realized that this revelation had shifted something within him. His respect had grown into something deeper, a budding admiration, tinged with the beginnings of something he had not expected, the first stirrings of genuine affection. The night settled over the ranch like a gentle embrace, carrying with it a newfound understanding. James knew that the secret actions of the timid maid had revealed her true self, and in doing so, had changed the way he saw her, and perhaps even the way he saw himself. The quiet experiment had ended, but its effects would linger far longer than the soft rustle of footsteps or the gentle glow of moonlight in the room. The morning sun spilled into the mansion, casting warm, golden light across the polished wooden floors. James Whitmore awoke with a sense of calm and clarity, a subtle smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. The events of the previous night lingered in his mind, replaying like a quiet revelation. Clara's actions, the meticulous care, the thoughtful gestures, and the unseen kindness, had left a profound impression on him. What he had intended as a simple test had instead become an eye-opening lesson in character and humanity. As he moved through the halls, James found Clara tending to the indoor plants near the sunlit window. Her back was slightly curved from concentration, her hands gently brushing the leaves as if they were delicate treasures. She looked up briefly and offered a timid smile, the same soft expression that had first drawn his attention days ago. There was no awareness in her eyes of the admiration he felt, no hint that he had observed her the night before. And yet, in that simple, unassuming presence, James recognized a rare authenticity, someone whose actions were guided not by expectation or recognition, but by genuine care and integrity. He approached her quietly, careful not to startle her, and cleared his throat softly. "Clara," he said, his voice gentle yet steady. She turned, startled at first, but then relaxed when she saw the familiar, kind expression on his face. I wanted to thank you," he continued. "For everything you do for this house, for the ranch. And for me. I saw last night how much thought and care you put into every small action. It didn't go unnoticed." Clara's eyes widened slightly, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. She had not expected such words, nor had she imagined that her quiet efforts would leave an impression. For her, these were simply acts done out of respect and diligence, nothing more. Yet James's acknowledgement carried weight beyond anything she could have anticipated. The recognition was sincere, unembellished, and it filled her with a quiet warmth she had never before felt in such a formal, intimidating place. For James, the experience had also brought a shift within himself. He realized that his curiosity had revealed not just Clara's character, but also his own capacity for admiration, empathy, and perhaps even affection. Her gentle, thoughtful nature had awakened in him a respect that was transforming into something deeper, an emotional connection that went beyond mere admiration. He saw her not only as a diligent and loyal maid, but as a young woman of rare kindness and integrity, someone whose presence enriched the household far more than he could have imagined. In the days that followed, a subtle change settled over their interactions. Clara remained her shy, timid self, yet there was a quiet confidence in the way she carried out her duties, knowing that her efforts were seen and appreciated. James, in turn, found himself watching her with a new sense of attentiveness, not to test her anymore, but to truly understand and value her presence. Their relationship began to develop slowly, built on respect, trust, and the unspoken acknowledgement of the kindness they both recognized in each other. By the evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and painted the ranch in shades of amber and gold, James reflected on the events that had unfolded. What had started as curiosity had revealed a truth far more meaningful than he could have imagined. Clara's secret actions had shown him the depth of her character, and in turn, had opened his eyes to a newfound appreciation and connection. In the quiet of the ranch, amidst the rustle of the trees and the soft murmur of the animals, a bond was forming, one built on respect, admiration, and the promise of something more, waiting patiently to bloom. And so, life on the ranch continued, richer than before, not in wealth or possessions, but in the quiet, profound understanding that sometimes, the most remarkable qualities are revealed not in grand gestures, but in the small, secret actions of a gentle heart.